Welcome back to the 1% Insight. This week I'm delighted to be joined by Maurice Lawlor, Head of Enterprise Sales at prerender.io. Prerender.io helps you show up wherever your audience searches, whether that's Google, ChatGPT, Reddit or TikTok. They are a rendering solution for developers and marketers, allowing your JavaScript website to be crawled, indexed and featured by search engines, social channels and AI tools in record time. This is a major importance for the future of search, how your B2B tech and SaaS company are found. So I'm delighted to be delving into this conversation today with Maurice. How's it going, Maurice?
All good and you?
Very good, sure. I suppose we're, by the time we're recording this, it's the kind of last week before Christmas. When it's released, it'll probably be, first or second week in January. So getting into the festive spirit now. So I'd love to kind of get your kind of career journey. That's how we always kick things off here at 1% Insight, to kind of get a better understanding of yourself. Because I know you're a salesman that has, been involved with also marketing teams in the past as well. So I'd love to know how you kind of got into sales, enterprise sales, and how you ended up at prerender.io.
I suppose earlier on in my career, I initially, showing my age here, it was the early 2000s, and it was more or less basically when the telco industry was probably one of the strongest things in Ireland at the time. You had the likes of, ESAT, BT Ireland, stuff like that were really starting to make inroads. What I did is I kind of got my first real proper gig out of college, basically was working for, selling telcos basically to businesses, and it kind of moved from there straight on to BT, which kind of moved into more of a larger type role, which is more of infrastructural type stuff as well for customers. So rather than just selling, switching your phone service type thing, it proved into selling servers, laptops, all that kind of stuff as businesses grow. And later in my career, then I kind of went into EMC. That's probably where I spent the longest part of my career, and anyone from Cork, will know EMC and know it well. And that's where I really got into that whole kind of nuts and bolts side of how businesses work and how the infrastructural side of that works. I suppose I spent 7 years there. I started working in the South African market, which was an interesting market, to be fair, and then from there I moved over to the UK public sector. And then from there I moved into enterprise in the UK, dealing with some of the largest banks in the UK, all the way back into finishing off my career dealing with large enterprise banks, insurance companies, stuff like that in Ireland. Yeah, and then I made it, I call it the tactical decision, I don't know if it was or not, to move into the wonderful world of SaaS. Guy I worked with in Teamwork was leading up the sales organization in teamwork.com, and basically asked me, we had a chat, basically, would I come over? I said, yeah, 100%. Guy called him Flourish. He has a new company here in Cork called Control.io as well, which is fantastic. But yeah, no, it's there I kind of really got my first eye-opening into the world of SaaS, basically, and spent about nearly 3 years with those guys then as well, before I moved on. But yeah, no, in the last couple of years, I've worked for different venture capitalists in terms of businesses they were trying to turn around and stuff like that. I've spent before I moved to my current role, I spent the last kind of 4 years working in both the higher education space for, web content management platforms, as well as also leading up a second part of that business, which is Better Examinations, which was leading the sales and marketing side of it there for that side. And within the last 3 months, I've moved over to a company called prerender.io, who are basically reshaping the whole discoverability, the finding stuff side of, kind of SEO and AEO and stuff like that, and how that looks.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to kind of get an insight into prerender.io in terms of it's changed, I guess, the whole marketing game, sales as well. A lot of, we speak a lot about it here on the 1% Insight, is a lot of the B2B buying process is being done through independent, self-directed research on the other end. So SaaS companies, tech companies, can be more difficult because you can't track it, or they don't have to come to you at an event always now to get the information. They're going on to LLMs, they're searching on Google, they're on social, they're listening to podcasts, they're consuming all this information across different touch points. So that becomes quite difficult. So that's why I think it's really interesting what Prerender are doing in terms of the indexing part of it. So I'd love to kind of learn how that kind of works and what you do there.
Yeah, so the problem is with the majority of the websites that are out there right now all run, heavily run JavaScript on the front end. Without fail, it's there. The problem is that, while Google probably has a very sophisticated crawler, to basically look up and see what's happening, it gives up as well after a while, you know what I mean? On the other side of it, then we know from the LLMs on our side of testing and stuff like that, that one, the actual crawlers are not sophisticated. The technology that runs the whole LLM is sophisticated, but the crawler isn't sophisticated. It gives up quite easily. So if the website itself isn't in full HTML, it can't be really discovered. Now, what we've figured out a couple of different things. What everybody else is optimizing for mobile, LLMs actually prefer full-on desktop websites to get the information. So it's an interesting thing there when you kind of get to that, and then the shift comes like, oh no, we've got to optimize back into full desktop mode rather than actually everything for mobile. So thing there, it's one of those fundamental challenges customers I think face across the board right now is if they want to do SSR basically on their server side rendering and stuff like that, it takes time, it takes development, it takes cost. That's what most companies kind of struggle with and stuff like that. Is time, cost, and people. From our side of it, you can have actually the trial up running and getting information and re-rendering it out and pointing the bots over to it within about an hour. And it's a really easy model to do. You kind of like you pick how many renders you're going to need, what pages you're going to render out. So like if you're an e-commerce site, you'll render all your product pages. You can move your FAQs and all that stuff down to later caching and stuff like that. It's an interesting world for me because I again, from my last role, it was all web content management. It was about delivery, making sure the website was making sure it was really search engine, optimized, findable, the finding stuff side of things was there. But this side of it's completely different where it's, people are basically using LLMs now to make their buying decisions earlier. So if you're not in that space and not ranked, quickly, highly, and effectively, you're missing a trick massively. Because I know from my own, buying, as researching for Christmas and all the different things, I used ChatGPT. I was having a full-on conversation with it about where I can get this, where I can that, what the delivery times are looking like, all that kind of stuff. What are the reviews like on this stuff? Is it good? Is it bad? So if you're not getting that information into those LLMs, you're missing a trick completely.
It's a huge problem that a lot of sales and marketing teams are facing, especially in the software and the tech industry, because I guess it's so new. Sometimes, especially with larger companies, it can be hard to make those changes or see it coming, and then you're too big to kind of move. So there's a lot of revenue at stake here in terms of future pipeline, because a couple of podcasts ago we were chatting about some research that came out from Sixth Sense in terms of the modern kind of B2B buyer, and it was showcasing the amount of deals. I think it was like 95% of vendors asked or something along those lines that they reached out to were on that kind of day one shortlist that they were creating, and that 4 or 5 deals were given to whoever was ranked number one on that day one shortlist. So it just shows the importance, and the LLMs are obviously playing a huge role in how people are shaping buying decisions because there's so much information out there and they can ask any question they want. How have you found the transition from maybe sales 10 years ago in a technology software sense to now in terms of how you lead that? Has there been much of a difference in the B2B buyers?
From my side of it, it's more how you get to talk to a customer. Before, you would have had a very, I suppose, if you look at the SDR teams we built up and stuff like that, 10 years ago, those guys would have been sitting on, making phone calls, sending emails, very much, I would call it manual work, or as a good ex-manager of mine put it, the hand-to-hand combat of sales. Kind of just doing outreach, making call, having lists, stuff like that. That has changed completely. You know what I mean? While email is still a really important tool, the phone practically for nearly every company now is dead. And we can probably thank COVID for that, and that's never a bad thing either, to not have the phone constantly going. But while other things have happened in terms of LLMs being used more in terms of automating stuff, generating out content, stuff like that, there is a lot of, I would call it AI slop out there as well at the moment in terms of outreach. I get it daily at the moment, and it's worse now because I think everybody's becoming quite aware of what things to spot, within emails, stuff like that. You see the M dash, you see things massively bolded throughout of it, little giveaways and stuff like that are kind of there, and I do appreciate it's great to help, drive engagement, get things done quickly. But take a bit of time, get it to do the basics, and then reword it or reshape it, and have the human work with it as well before you kind of go over with it. But there's a lot of stuff there. It's a very noisy place at the moment. But I always kind of bring it back to the fundamentals, as I call it. What is the fundamental problem we fix for a customer, and how do we tell them about that? So, it's whether we identify that fundamental problem, dear customer, what are the things that keep you up at night? when you're looking at the ceiling at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're worried about maybe conversion stuff, website not being looked at. You know what I mean? Why are we not ranking up well in Google? Why are they looking at it like that perspective? Always bring it back to the fundamentals of what is the fundamental problem we fix for that customer all the time. Then stories is the next point I'd always bring up on it, is like, how do we build on what we have? So like I can say from pre-render's perspective, we have some of the biggest names in the tech industry. Salesforce is a customer of ours. Microsoft is a customer of ours. One of the ones we're really excited about is On Running and stuff like that. Like, you know what I mean? These are really big established brands, and they're not doing, SSR on their side of it. They're using our product to do because it does it better, faster, and it's all we do. It's our core thing, and it's a fundamental problem we fix for them quickly, effectively, and stuff like that. So these are the small things. I always take it back to storytelling. It's, whether you're, using LinkedIn to do the marketing on side of it and stuff like that, always bring it back to the fundamental problems you fix. And then from the customers you land, incentivize them to tell that story with you as a partner as such, basically, and build on it from there. The big thing about enterprise sales is its trust in the market. So having a really strong product that can deliver repeatable results all the time is key. And if you can do that and you can get some good stories out of it, it always helps then, because that's how you build on it. Enterprises generally, it's a big area, but it's not either. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, you'd be amazed. There's stuff I used in other companies I'm bringing into pre-render that we've used other ways, because I know it's a good product and it really delivers for sales teams and marketing teams and product teams and stuff like that.
Going into 2026, because I guess when this releases, it'll be 2026. For those software companies, tech companies, analyzing their kind of go-to-market strategy, their sales strategy, what channels are working well? I know it's kind of a broad question, but what channels have you found work well in 2025, and what do you see kind of happening in 2026 in terms of speaking to those customers and getting that communication right?
I suppose the first problem you have is noise. Everybody is searching for something out of it. I do think the LLM side of it is probably where people are going to leverage in more to make sure that they're ranking well within there, and trying to be part of that decision early as such. From our side of it, you know what I mean? From pre-render side of it, like, you know what I mean? The good thing is we are inundated with inbound leads. It's fantastic. You know what I mean? You couldn't ask for a nice situation, because it is a really key problem that we fix for customers right now. So being able to do that is quite good. But we are tactically changing as well. Like, you know what I mean? We're building up libraries of stories. We're building up some good video stories and things like that with customers for next year, to be able to help drive and tell that out there. The one thing I would say for a lot of companies I see is that, especially non-marketing people looking at marketing people, it's kind of like, is make sure you pick the 2 or 3 things you want to do and test, and don't change the strategy, weekly. Pick the 1 or 2 things you want to do, one of the things you're going to achieve, push everything to the side, say, we're not going to do that because, and give them the reasons why, and just stick to your things and have the long-term plan to see how that things. But figure out what your kind of, your KPIs, your OKRs, or whatever you want to have around that, or what are the key outcomes we want to get, and what are the benchmarks in between that we're going to see is that succeeding or not. You may tailor stuff along the way, but I see people a lot these days, and I've been there myself, where if it's not working in a week, you're kind of going, oh no, what have we done wrong? We spent X amount of cash or put everything around it, and it's just not ran its thing yet. So stick with the plan. Don't try and deviate from the plan, but, like, you know what I mean? Know when to make changes and stuff like that.
A lot of the audience listening will be on the marketing side, but no doubt there will be some on the sales, go-to-market side as well, in terms of B2B tech audience and software. In terms of marketing and sales, now you've kind of started in sales and are heavily sales, but have led marketing teams as well as that role. How have you seen the two work together well? Because there's a lot of instances in companies where sales and marketing might not see eye to eye, and that's obviously very counterproductive in most companies, because they need to be working together to get the best results. So how have you found those teams to work well, and maybe some tips for that?
Yeah, like I suppose I've seen both, as you said, I've seen both sides of it. I've seen the part where people in boardrooms are literally like a marketing leader and a sales leader, and they're screaming at each other because they're like 2 children, who can't get their own way. But also, I can talk from my time at Terminal 4 and, Better Examinations, and both into pre-render, we had some wonderful leaders there that were leading that charge together. It's very much getting everyone around, you know, making marketing and sales own the same goal and the same outcomes and stuff like that is really important. So understanding that, you know what I mean, look, even though your target, let's say, is 5 million, for example, and you're all going towards that 5 million, it's what marketing can do to support that 5 million. It's what partnerships can do to support that 5 million. It's what outbound, from a sales perspective, can do to support that. And it's all coming up with a key set of metrics around it and having a plan around, okay, marketing is going to try and generate X amount of revenue next year for you in terms of MQLs. From those MQLs, we need X amount of those to turn to SQLs, and out of those we need to convert it over. But it is about making sure everyone's aligned on the same thing. The problem you generally have is that when you don't have one leader sitting over both teams, it falls apart quite quickly. Once you have kind of somebody there, and I can say it from a pre-render perspective, Tiff, who leader from my side, my boss, is amazing at bringing everyone together, getting everyone aligned. Everyone's now kind of knows exactly what the plan is. We know exactly what we need to do next year. It's we're all together in it. You know what I mean? We all are heading towards the same goal. When we look at benchmarks, it's not the marketing benchmarks versus the sales benchmarks. It's how are we all together as such. So, and it's basically kind of bringing that over. And you get less of the kind of friction then it go over, because I can see from our side, like our sales guys here in pre-render are helping get more case studies in for the marketing team and vice versa. You know what I mean? And it's a real, you can see between the two guys we're currently working on it, like it's a real copacetic relationship in terms of they're really getting on together, they're getting stuff done, they're making it happen, they're working time out with the customer to meet and all that kind of stuff. It's fantastic.
For any B2B tech and software marketing teams, what can they do going 2026 and beyond to help sales? So like from a market perspective, with your sales hat on, what do you like to see from the marketing team in terms of the efforts that they're doing? What's the most impactful activities they can be doing from a revenue generating point of view?
The one thing everybody kind of gets wrong is they sell features. And I've seen marketing teams sometimes, in the past and stuff like that, heavily leverage on that this feature is the greatest feature of all time. This feature will blow everything else out of the park. And that really doesn't work from an overall perspective. What I tend to see is, if we're launching a feature, what's the problem it actually fixes along with the other problem we have? And how do we make kind of, if we've done a beta or we've done an alpha or something with a customer, how do we get the story out of the customer beforehand to leverage that? If not, you know what I mean, how do we get some existing customers to use it early on and be early adopters within that to get that story? It's key is the relevance of what problem we fix for a customer. That's it. Stories matter. And this is my thing, stories really matter to me, because that's something we can tell another customer. Did you know Microsoft had this problem? We ultimately fixed it for them, and then we were able to kind of move forward. You can't, you know what I mean? If people will associate problems with themselves much more than they quickly see the solution as such. So that's always how I break it down, is kind of fix the fundamental problem and everything else will kind of look after itself.
And I guess that would kind of come from the case studies that you're building then from the marketing point of
massively.
view. Have you seen, obviously it's a multi-channel approach then, like we spoke about, similar to what's going on with pre-render in terms of the many people, different people are searching. So obviously, would you be looking at, communicating that story on social, website, anywhere else that kind of maybe you've seen work well in terms of the channels that you're trying to spread that message on?
I suppose it's figuring out where your audience lives is the thing. You know what I mean? LinkedIn is probably one of the best ones in terms of if you're doing B2B. Ideally, if you get a case study, get it on video, and then at least you can write the copy afterwards to go with it. So you're leveraging two sides of it, but video ideally is key, because that, in this day and age, if you're maintaining a good YouTube channel, you're maintaining, a good LinkedIn presence on top of it, you'll rank better basically around it, unless you're doing some paid campaigns now as well to push that, which is probably the ideal thing to do if you're trying to tell that good story as well. With that, if you're running your own podcast and stuff like that, you know what I mean, have that guest on and talk about the good things that they fix on it as well, you know what I mean, and promote that as part of it. So there's not just one channel. I'd say it's probably a multi-channel approach. In terms of the video side of it, yeah, it's great. Have that done. Try and lock that in as early as you can. But also then from a kind of LLM side of it and search and the finding stuff side of it, make sure you've got that whole written side of it done as well, so it's easier to find and rank up that side too. So yeah.
From the kind of AI LLM's point of view, what do they take most value from? Is it text, is it video, or is it that combination like image, video, text, and they kind of take a culmination, I guess, of all those different content types to then take the information and then get back in a prompt?
The problem is generally if you're not hosted on one of the main video platforms, you'll struggle to get video into the LLM. That's just kind of from my take on it. I could be completely wrong in saying that, but that was my take on it. From my side of the text is probably the more important piece. Now, unless you've linked it in YouTube and stuff like that, and you've done that side of it, it'll probably rank that bit better. But yeah, I would say basically getting the text side of it first, because everything's probably going to be based off a prompt in, versus getting that information back and stuff like that.
Lastly, on the kind of sales and marketing piece and how they can work together, I know from a marketing point of view, one of the most difficult things when they're, maybe fighting for budget or showcasing the ROI of their work, because yes, the trust building and having that consistent presence isn't very important, but sometimes people and departments and boards like to see numbers because it makes it feel a bit more real than just we need to be doing this because the research shows us that we need to be speaking to the people that are out of market, the 95% that are out of market right now. In terms of attribution, how can marketing teams better attribute or set themselves up to better attribute their marketing efforts in terms of leading to MQLs and SQLs and kind of their impact on revenue?
Ideally at the moment, tracking it through forms, having a fully linked up system, So from our side, let's say we use HubSpot and we use HubSpot Forms as part of it. So then it's fully traceable and trackable. Anything we can do to make sure the marketing team is getting the kudos as well on that side of it. But having those numbers there in terms of, for every MQL you get in, what does that translate into how many SQLs actually happen out of it, and how those SQLs then move to that. The ideal thing then, and you can do this monthly or quarterly, whichever way you want to do it. You then benchmark. Thanks to marketing, we have closed X amount of deals, and it's contributed X amount of revenue, and so forth and stuff like that. So it should always be tagged and locked in the right way, even if it's somebody that comes in via LinkedIn, via direct message or something like that. As long as we're tagging it on our side in terms of this was a MQ from marketing department as such, basically they get this lead for us in because someone saw something and they messaged on LinkedIn and it comes true. As long as we tag it in the right way and stuff like that, and that's having good, I suppose, pipeline hygiene and stuff like that, making sure the right fields are being filled out every time and everything. But at the end of the day, you have to benchmark those metrics because, as I said earlier on, we're all in this together, and one of the key metrics you want to do is where are my leads coming from? So marketing, outbounding, inbound, whichever it is, partnerships, how they're all linked and how that flows through in the forecast. And then you get your different, as you go through the year, you get that trend of marketing are absolutely killing it this year because we're, kind of 75% of all our leads are coming from them, 20% from Ting and 5% from outbound, let's say, and you benchmark it up that way then as well. So yeah, no, it can vary across it, but, having a locked in process and a good process basically to kind of, one, make sure everybody loves an attaboy. So it's kind of like making sure that we have the right stuff and the right reporting structure and stuff like that in place, that it is reporting the right information, and as well having the sales reps and the teams around it, from a sales operations perspective, making sure that they have the right things that we can map and track everything through the system in the right way so that it reflects well on everybody at the end of it.
Throughout every sales and marketing over a career, there can be different challenges that people need to kind of encounter to learn from. Has there been any challenges that stood out for you in terms of an overall sales approach, sales and marketing? Maybe that could be a challenge as well in terms of getting people together. What has been kind of like one challenge that has challenged you in your career in terms of having to solve a difficult problem in terms of a sales and marketing alignment or a sales problem and finding a solution to that?
I suppose there has been many. Generally the one you kind of always fail is when leads kind of fall off a cliff and stuff like that. You're trying to figure out why, what are the what are the different tactics that we're using that were working and they're suddenly not working. And I suppose it's really understanding on each campaign we do and each campaign we did previously. We always try to do, a deep dive afterwards. What worked, what didn't work. It's not about going into anything, I suppose, kind of doing the blame game or anything like that and trying to just say you screwed up and you've done this and oh my god you're terrible, which we'd never do. But the idea is that you would go in and you just do post-mortem. What were the key objectives? Because the whole thing is, again, I hate to say it and everybody's probably sick of hearing, it comes back to process. Having a really defined process in terms of if we're going to do a campaign, what that actually looks like. What are the key results of the campaign? It's great to say, oh, we're going to do a campaign. What are we doing? What are we promoting? What are we pushing? What's the narrative? What's the outcome? What are the key, CTAs that are on there, as part of it? So when we start to look at that kind of stuff and what that actually looks like overall, you then can go, right, how do we do when we check week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, when we do our weekly catch-ups and stuff like that? How did that look like and what were we tracking like? And why didn't we identify something sooner as part of it? And don't get me wrong, everybody's busy. Things sometimes fall to track, and we have done it. And I've seen it at a previous company where we didn't review it for 4 weeks and it was completely and utterly a mess at the end of it. And we had spent a significant amount of cash with nothing to show for it. But it just reaffirms that, look, you can kind of go mea culpa, it's my fault, and you know what I mean? But you just pick it up and you kind of go, right, what are the things we now need to make sure we kind of locked in, that we don't do this again, and that we're put in place and they're reviewed regularly, and that we know exactly what the outcomes are. And at the end of it, whether it be good, bad, indifferent, or whatever, you review it. You sit down, what worked, what didn't work, what we need to change, what we need to kind of tailor up, and vice versa. So yeah, we have done it before, but in saying it, by not doing it for 1 month, it cost us 3 months of sales leads as such, basically, that were coming through from the marketing side of it. And that has a massive effect, because then when we look back, it's not even the next quarter, but it's the next 2 quarters that are massively affected, which left us, Q1, great, Q2, Q3, really tough, Q4, fantastic, because we had refixed it, rebuilt it, but it was the amount of hours and work that had to go into hit Q4 was just significant. And there was no need for it through, literally like, our own kind of taking the eye off the ball a little on stuff.
Yeah, no, brilliant lessons in that, because it happens everywhere and it happens to everyone. So I think it's a good
Yep.
reminder for people as well, is to keep checking it and just take a no blame approach to say what works, what doesn't, and how we're going to go from here. Super
Exactly.
stuff. So before you share your 1% insight to our audience today, Maurice, I have a kind of a quick rapid fire round where there's a few short questions. And I've changed this over the course of the recent podcast episodes, because I found that the best book for B2B tech sales or B2B tech marketing isn't always the best choice. So now I'm including all mediums. So it could be podcasts, newsletters, online pages. So the first question is the best resource for B2B tech sales or B2B tech marketing, in your own opinion?
2. I'm going to use 2 because I'm going to be greedy. Best book for me was Always Impossible to Inevitable. It's well worth the read. If you want to get like really good tips on prospecting and really good tips on qualification and stuff like that, a guy called John Barrows. You'll find him on LinkedIn. He's all over. He's very, very good. His stuff is just, kind of really simple, really easy, you know what I mean? And it all makes really, really good sense. Yeah, that would be my 2, my 2 basically.
And the second question is a company, not prerender.io, you can't include that is doing great B2B technology marketing, software marketing, in your own opinion.
I like Gong.io. I like their stuff. Their product is really good because I've used it previously, but I actually like their marketing as well. It's just literally like know your audience, and it's salespeople. And how do we point that at them, and how do we kind of really reference, again, I always bring it back to the fundamental problems, and they kind of really do. What are the things that keep salespeople up at night? And I just like their simple, easy approach. It's not flashy. It's not, you know what I mean, big ad campaigns on it. It's just really, what's the problem you have? We think we can fix it for you. Here's the reasons why. And I like that.
Brilliant. And the last one in the rapid fire round, Mars, is if you weren't in sales, what would you be doing?
I don't know. Is the honest truth. I suppose like if I wasn't in sales and stuff, I would probably be in a very mundane type job, I would say. Yeah, no. Sales is completely like, yeah, I love it. But I couldn't tell you where I'd be otherwise. I'm
Couldn't
doing it
imagine a
too
world
long.
without it. Yeah,
No, I'm like 20, nearly, oh Jesus, 25 years of it now, solid. So yeah,
perfect. And then lastly, what is your 1% insight that you would like to share with our listeners today in terms of B2B tech?
I suppose from my side of it, the 1% is sustainable growth for me comes from clarity. Having a real, I suppose, deep understanding of your customer, understanding the real stories, making sure all the teams are aligned and just building trust and long-term momentum stuff on that. Like, so it's kind of, I suppose, really understanding who you're selling to, what are the things you're fixing for them, making sure everybody understands that and make sure everybody's, against that one goal as such, basically, that they're looking towards.
Thank you, Mars. Thanks very much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your 1% insights with us and our audience. Where can our listeners find you and learn a bit more about prerender.io?
I'm on LinkedIn. So best place to find me. Yeah. Other than that, you can look at prerender.io. Reach out to us if you want to have a chat about it, and we'll more than happily look after you.
Thank you, Mars.